Mark Davis had just turned 52. A successful real estate agent in Denver, Colorado, he found himself navigating a world that had changed dramatically from his earlier dating years. His wife of 20 years had passed away unexpectedly 5 years ago, and since then, he'd mostly thrown himself into work. Friends often encouraged him to get back out there. "You're still handsome, Mark. Women your age, and even younger, would be lucky to have you." That's what his best friend Jake would say, nudging him every time they went out for drinks. Mark wasn't against dating again, but every time he thought about approaching a younger woman, he froze up. What would they even see in him? Would they think he was just another older guy having a midlife crisis? Then came the moment that changed everything. At a friend's birthday party, held at a trendy rooftop bar downtown, Mark met Rachel. She was 30, confident, and intelligent, with a natural laugh and a spark in her eyes. Their conversation flowed easily, from books to business to food. There was no awkward age-related tension. But when she excused herself to talk to another friend, Mark couldn't help but wonder what had made her stay and talk to him for so long. That night, he sat at home and began reflecting. He realized it wasn't just about being charming, it was about making women feel seen, respected, and appreciated. He'd always known the power of a well-placed compliment, but now he began to understand it in a deeper way. It wasn't about flattery. It was about sincerity, nuance, and timing. The next few weeks, Mark started going out more, slowly learning what made younger women respond positively to him. Compliments played a major role, but not the kind you'd find in cheesy pickup lines. These were compliments that made women light up from within, compliments that showed emotional intelligence and genuine observation. His first experiment was at a bookstore. He was browsing the nonfiction section when he struck up a conversation with Emily, a 29-year-old writer who was scanning titles on creativity. She mentioned that she often felt misunderstood when she told people she wanted to write for a living. Without hesitation, Mark said, "I admire that you're brave enough to pursue your passion. A lot of people lose that spark trying to fit into the world's expectations." Emily blinked, and then her whole face softened. "Wow. Not many people say that. They usually ask if I've published anything, like my value depends on that." That was the first time Mark saw how powerful it could be to compliment a woman's values and aspirations, not just her looks. It stayed with him. Next, there was an encounter at his gym with Haley, a fitness instructor in her early 30s. They exchanged smiles over several weeks until one day, while grabbing a smoothie, they ended up talking. She mentioned how hard it was to manage clients, group classes, and her own workouts. "You have this natural strength, not just physically, but in how you carry yourself. It's obvious you work hard at everything you do." Haley smiled, so wide it was almost bashful. "That's probably one of the nicest things anyone said to me this week." From there, Mark began to understand a pattern. These weren't compliments about superficial beauty. They were acknowledgments of deeper qualities: strength, passion, intelligence, style, grace. At a networking mixer, he met Natalie, a 32-year-old startup founder who was giving a talk on female leadership in tech. After her presentation, he walked up and said, "The clarity in how you presented your ideas really stuck with me. You have a calm authority that makes people listen." Natalie beamed. That means a lot coming from someone who actually paid attention. Over time, Mark grew more confident, not because he was memorizing lines, but because he was genuinely observing and appreciating the women he talked to. The age gap stopped mattering. His compliments weren't performative, they were thoughtful. They made younger women feel seen in ways many younger men overlooked. He once had a conversation with Jasmine, a 28-year-old photographer he met during an art walk in Boulder. She spoke about how people rarely understood her visual perspective. Mark said, "The way you frame your photos, it's like you see stories in silence. That's a gift." She didn't respond right away. Instead, she stared at him with curious eyes. "You actually looked at them?" Most people just scroll and say cool. That moment was quiet, but powerful. At a jazz night in a cozy lounge, he met Lauren, a 31-year-old who loved vintage fashion and classic music. They bonded over old records, and he said, You have this timeless elegance about you, like you'd fit in any era and still stand out." She laughed. "That might be the most poetic thing I've ever heard." But one night, Mark found himself challenged. He met Brianna, a 27-year-old digital marketer who was sharp, funny, and had a sarcastic edge. She teased him for being too polished. "You probably tell all women they're elegant and driven, right?" she said with a smirk. Mark chuckled.
No.
"I don't compliment people unless I actually mean it. With you, it's different. You have this fearless honesty that's rare. You say what others are too careful to say." Brianna raised an eyebrow, then nodded slowly. "Okay, I'll give you that. You actually notice something real." It hit him then. The most magnetic compliments are never cookie-cutter. They are reflections of genuine recognition. They bypass surface charm and go straight to the heart. Soon enough, Mark began dating more regularly. The women he met often commented on how refreshing it was to talk to someone who really listened. It wasn't just about what he said, it was how he said it. He paid attention. He gave compliments without strings attached. And they responded. He also learned restraint. There were times when the best compliment was silence, waiting, listening, allowing the other person to unfold naturally. Sometimes, that made his eventual words even more powerful. There was one moment that defined everything he'd learned. At a weekend retreat focused on personal development, he ended up sharing a cabin with several attendees, including a woman named Olivia, who was 34. She had recently gone through a divorce and wasn't looking for a rebound. They talked by the fire late into the night. She opened up about how she felt like she had lost her sense of self. He didn't rush to fix anything. He just said, "You're rediscovering parts of yourself most people are too scared to even explore. That takes courage. And I see that in you." Tears welled in her eyes and she whispered, "Thank you for saying that. I needed to hear it." That was it. That was the essence of everything, being present, being honest, and speaking from a place of kindness and respect. Over the months, Mark kept meeting women. Some relationships stayed short, some lasted longer. Eventually, he met Claire, 36, a high school guidance counselor, empathetic, witty, and grounded. What started as a casual conversation at a charity gala turned into something neither of them expected. She told him later that it was his compliment that first made her consider him seriously. "You said I made people feel safe just by being myself. No one's ever said that to me. It made me feel seen in a way I didn't even know I wanted." They began dating seriously, and Mark felt something he hadn't in years: ease, joy, and connection. Looking back, Mark realized it wasn't about trying to impress younger women that it was.